Oh.
Because I gave it to Crowley. So I was kind of the.
I think you gave it to Albie too.
No, he was way later.
And now
I think
gave
you
it
were.
to Albie.
I think you were. I didn't see Albie. I think you were still contagious when you guys went golfing or something.
No. Because I quarantined for a long time.
Yeah, I didn't see anybody. I never came out of my house.
What's a long time, like 4 days?
No, like over 10, 14, like.
Yeah.
You're the only one, maybe Tim Hawley I gave it to.
You guys.
Because we golf.
I gave it to nobody.
All
I
I
kept
know
it
is
to
after
myself.
I had it.
Yeah, and the idea of men growing up, like that's a big thing for you.
Right.
Because I remember you talking about your childhood, how you had dad doing fun things on the weekend.
Right.
So that kind of just continued into adulthood where you
Right.
wanted to just play and
Right.
be responsible.
Yeah, for me, like, and I was resonating a little bit with your story too. Like, my dad was present. He was physically present, but emotionally absent. So there wasn't a lot of like even when I was doing stupid stuff as a kid, like lighting off bottle rockets, and firecrackers, throwing them in the street, playing war, and I'm like, the police are like saying, "Hey, buddy, what are you doing?" I didn't get in trouble for it. Like my dad, there was no sense of like, this is not okay.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Don't tell your mom was kind of the thing, and off we went. So.
What do you think helped you to like grow up on the man side?
Other men in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my dad taught me some great things as a boy. I think even things I carry with me today. But I think it was just other men coming around me saying, "Hey, this is what it means to be a godly man."
Yeah.
And they would point to Scripture, and say, "These are the things you need to focus in on. These are examples you need to look to in Scripture, and this is what's expected of you as a man.
Yeah.
Do these things." And they didn't let me off the hook. Like if I was screwing off or not following through, they called me on my crap, and didn't let me wiggle out. So I feel like my parents let me wiggle out a lot.
Yeah.
So my charm, whatever it was back then.
Yeah.
Probably the same charm Nathan has now.
Probably looks like what your 19-year-old son has.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Why do you think it's so hard for like men to grow up? Like just that desire to be boys forever, and to some extent we are, right? Like
Sure.
we still joke around no matter how old we get. Like
Yeah.
we love to do fun things and play, but
Totally.
like to take responsibility. Like what do you guys think is just the challenge for men?
I think there's a lot of. I think there's a lot of challenges. I think just there are so many young men growing up just with dads who were never taught how to be dads, and so I think there are a lot of men that just aren't equipped to train up their kids. And as I thought about this the last couple of days, I was thinking a lot about the churches that we adopt and that we partner with, and oftentimes these churches are filled with not filled, but they're the handful of remaining members they're filled with folks who are older. I mean, right? The remaining members are older, and as I thought about this week, I thought just where the disconnect was. Where did we miss the last several generations of men that should have been brought up and trained up in the church? Where did we fail in discipling men along the way? Because at some point in the 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s, at some point we stopped discipling men, and we've got 200,000 Protestant churches in America that are dying because we don't have anybody to lead them.
Right.
And so I just wonder along the way we lost something. We lost the importance of discipleship and raising up men in the church to be the leaders and the men they were called to be.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When was that? If we look back in history, when do you think it started deteriorating?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the statistics seem to indicate that sometime between the 50s and the 70s, and there's a lot of, obviously we can point to a lot of cultural changes in the 80s and in the 90s and even more recently, certainly. But the reality is almost 70% of kids in America that go through church in high school don't come back to church post-college. They walk away from the church. And so we have to really just look at that number and hopefully be convicted by it and say, man, we're doing something wrong, right? There's a problem with whatever we've been doing. We're not bridging the gap between adolescence and adulthood in the church, maybe as well as we should. I mean, the church at large. We're not teaching young men how to be grown men. We're not teaching them how to mature into manhood in a way that they're making that transition, because they're not. They're walking away from the church. They're walking away from their relationship with God, and they're obviously they're not leading in the church, right? Because they're absent.
Yeah, and Pastor Matt's talked about the idea of like the Peter Pans, like the boys that never want to grow up.
Yeah.
Like, what keeps people, do you think, stuck in the wanting to be a kid still?
Yeah, I think there's two ways of looking at the Peter Pan syndrome. You know, we can look at it from an emotional point of view, and then we can look at it from a spiritual point of view. You know, going back to thinking about how we were raised and how we grew up, I was in the same situation as you. My father was there, but he was spiritually absent. So he taught me how to be a good worker. He was always a good provider. And that's how I grew up. I've always been a hard worker. I've always provided for my family, but I was missing the spiritual maturity.
That's right.
I didn't have anyone who taught me how to be a good godly man. And when I had to learn, it was painful. So I think we need to focus on the spiritual side of it too, and teach our boys that, yeah, you can be a hard worker, you can be a good provider, but you also need to be a good godly man.
Yeah.
And be obedient.
That's right.
And, you know, and all those things that
Why do you think it was harder for you later in life? You know, you just talked about it being hard. What was it that was so hard later in life?
I think growing up, I had an idea of what a man was supposed to be. You know, you have a job, you get married, you have kids, and you take care of that.
Yeah.
Right.
But we all know that a marriage without God doesn't work,
Yeah,
right?
It's only part of the truth.
Parenting without God doesn't work. So it took for me to realize that and almost lose my family, you know, to wake up and say, hey, something's missing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, my dad wasn't equipped to teach me that.
Yeah.
So I had to seek other men here in the church and outside the church who I saw as mentors to teach me how to deal with situations and how to make the right decisions according to the Bible and according to how God wanted me to live.
Yeah.
And that was painful. So if we can start early and avoid that unnecessary pain for some of our men, that would be great.
Yeah.
You know, but the question is, how do we do that?
Yeah. I think part of the challenge too is that we deal with this aspect of we don't want to grow up, or we want sort of the grand adventure. And so we're trading temporary satisfaction, temporary sort of pleasures for what God really has for us. So we're choosing, you know, it's like the show Let's Make a Deal. Like, what do you want? What you have here? Do you want what's behind the curtain? And we're always like, no, I'll take what's here, you know, because this seems great. But what God has for us on the other side is way better.
Right.
And so there's something innate in us. You know, Christina likes to say, we're all perpetually 12, right? They're all boys, right? And there's a truth to that.
There is.
There's a truth to that. And part of that, though, is that that's the adventurous spirit, though, too. And there's that sense that we need to have that grand adventure, but we're trading these temporal satisfactions or pleasures or things that are right within our grasp versus working hard or doing the right things so that we can actually receive what God really has for us. That's the grand adventure.
Right.
That's the grand adventure.
Yeah, because growing up isn't just about being a good provider or having a job, because you can do that and not be a godly man. Is
Right.
kind of the point you were saying. Yeah. Were you going to say something? No.
I was just going to piggyback on what you were talking about, you know, regarding blessings. You know, we can miss out on so many blessings by just being men without being good godly men. And sometimes, you know, some guys will never know what they missed on.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I'm just so grateful that I had the opportunity to go through that. And after so many years, look back and see, man, I could have missed on all this stuff. Or in hindsight, this is what Satan wanted to keep me from.
That's right.
You know, and I'm just so thankful for the men that came around me and taught me. And and help me fight for my marriage, so I wouldn't miss out on some of the blessings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good.
I think too, like I think the enemy uses our good nature as parents to rob our kids of the opportunity of having to do things for themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
I think because I think, look, we as a parent, right? We're all parents. We want at least as much for our kids, if not more, than we had.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's a good thing, but I think the enemy uses it in a way that robs our kids of having to learn hard lessons,
Yeah.
and robs our kids of having to learn a work ethic. And I think about all the things that I try to drag my son into, and it's way more work having him help me do the yard than it is if I just go do the yard,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
But I need him to grow, right? I need him to learn, and so I have to be willing to make it harder now because he'll benefit later. And I think that there's just this reality to sometimes it's easier to just do it and not train him up and not raise him.
That's right.
Because it's easier,
Yeah, and like not becoming a Peter Pan is about growing up, right? And so there's the hard work aspect, right, which some generations got.
Yeah.
We're getting that less and less.
Yeah.
But now, like, emotional awareness is becoming more of a widespread thing. Like, our kids are going to grow up knowing a lot more about emotional health than we
right.
did
Sure.
when we grew up. But those things aren't enough, right? Someone has to come alongside us to do the hard work spiritually.
Yeah.
And you only find that in the church. Like, you don't find that. No one else is talking about that. No one else is looking at, like, how do you change the core of who you are, because we're told we're already good enough as we are.
Yeah.
Right? Which there's a truth in it, in that we're made in God's image, but that's not the only truth. We are broken, sinful, and that's a hard thing to wrestle with as men, especially if we didn't have affirming fathers who told us that we were, that they're proud of us and that we're valuable in and of ourselves. That's a challenging thing.
And society is not going to teach our kids that.
Right.
We have to do it.
Yeah.
And it's just getting harder and harder because it's becoming more challenging.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's so many things available to our kids that we didn't have.
Right.
And we struggle through some of that. I can't imagine having pornography on my phone, when I was growing up.
Oh, yeah.
Or having, being able to shop for anything and just quickly like that.
Yeah.
I just feel so bad for the young men that we have right now. And
Everything's accessible.
It really is. It really is. And that's hard because at a certain age, like my son is 10. Oh, he'll be 10 this year, but he wants a computer to play games in his room, and I'm like holding the line on it because I know I can't. It's not an appropriate conversation yet with him to talk about all the horrible things that are on the computer. We talk about some of the bad things that are on the computer, and he knows there's inappropriate things. He doesn't know what. But I know what's the second he's got a computer in the room, what's gonna be available to him.
Totally.
And I'm scared to death of that as a dad.
Yeah.
Right.
But I've got to hold that line of knowing, hey, this is what's best for him, even though he doesn't understand it, he doesn't like it, he doesn't get it. Even sometimes his mom's like, well, maybe we can put restriction. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. Like,
do it.
Yeah.
I don't think we can.
Yeah, because you can't. It's hard to undo.
Right.
Once you've done it, and just having access to the
That's
whole
right.
world.
That's right. Well, and everybody else does. I mean, that's the problem is, well, all my friends do. They all have a PC that they could do games
Because their
on. And I'm
parents are stupid. That's right.
Yeah, well, I know. That's what well, we're not everybody else. We have a different standard. We do things differently.
Right.
And they don't like that. They don't like that they have to sit at the table with their computer to do homework because we don't allow them. They don't like that.
Right.
But I it's my job to protect them from that as long as I can.
That's right.
Yeah, and there's shows like Social Dilemma kind of showing us like what marketers are doing through Google, Facebook, Apple, all that to keep boys being kids, right?
Yeah.
Like they don't want us to grow up. They want us to play video games for the rest of our life. They don't want us to play sports, just be a fantasy sports kind of guy and just be a kid.
Live in a fantasy world.
Live in fantasy world and not grow up. And that's like, so there's like growing up in the physical sense, but it's such a jump to like, how do we lead the church into the next generation? Like God's called men to be leaders. I mean, what a leap, if we're just stuck playing silly games all the time. How do we begin to like develop people spiritually and like call people to repentance and confession and faith and sharing the gospel. I mean, those are mature things that are challenging to to deal with.
And we have to remember that it's not necessarily wrong to play video games
Sure.
or like sports or have any other
Right.
hobby, but the problem comes when that's keeping you from being a responsible adult.
That's right.
Right.
Right? A responsible father, a responsible husband, and there has to be a balance. And I don't know, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, you're fine. Yeah, there needs to be a balance because we can't live in that world all the time.
Yeah.
But we do have to enter into the real world, right? Where real stuff happens, and that's where like calling comes in. What has God called us to be as men in the church? You know, from the garden, right?
Yeah. I mean, from the very beginning, He called us to steward what we've been given. You know, if you look at those verses, like in verses like, was it 14, 16, 17, right? He's like, tend the garden, take care of take care of these things.
Yeah.
And for each of us, we have things to take care of in our life. Some more, some less, some different. But we have things that we need to steward and care for and to tend to.
Yeah.
And maybe it's our work, you know, maybe it's our schoolwork, maybe it's our occupation, our vocation. You know, maybe we have a family, a wife, children, responsibilities, finances. Like we have these things that they're all opportunities to steward things, our bodies, our time. You know, like these are some of those precious things we have is time and our physical bodies. And we don't see those often as men as something to steward and to take. And God calls us to this. That's the very first thing He says is tend to these things, steward these things well.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that He said that before the fall.
Right.
Right. Those were some of the first instructions.
Right.
Take care of what I've given you.
Yeah.
Right.
And work it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not like, oh, okay, we have to work because we messed up. And
No.
now this is our life. No.
Right.
He wanted to give us purpose.
Yeah.
And I think that's why He instructed Adam to do that.
Right.
I think
Right.
the other thing that's interesting about that is there were two words in there that stuck out. Tend was one of them, but the other was watch. And I kept thinking about that the last couple of days, just this idea of watch. And I don't know about you guys. I think for me, the protector in me wants to come out. We're called to watch over what God has entrusted us with, right? And so tending it is one thing. That's to work it. That's to, you know, and I like to garden. So I think about what it means to tend to a garden, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's work. You know, you're pulling weeds and you're pruning things and you're taking care of things and you're watering things and you're feeding them and there's work involved. But watching over it is making sure that the wrong kind of critters don't come in and to eat what you've tended. And so, you know, for me, that second part of really watching over what God has entrusted us with,
There's a
our
protection
families.
factor.
There's a protection factor. I'm supposed to watch over. I'm supposed to watch over my son.
Right.
I'm supposed to make sure he's not doing anything stupid until he's smart enough to know better, right?
Right.
And so for me, that was something that really just stuck right with me. Was how important it was that we're not just tending, but we're watching too. We're protecting. We're guarding.
It's really good.
A sense of leadership, a sense of ownership. And knowing that you're responsible for that.
Yeah.
Well, it's going back to your conversation with your son about, well, just because all your friends' parents are letting them have a computer, they're not responsible for you. They're not
right.
watching over
Yeah,
you.
right.
I am.
Yeah, I
That's
am.
right.
And if that's what they want to do, that's on them, but I'm watching over
That's
you.
right.
And the answer is no.
That's exactly right.
Stop asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think it's interesting as a culture as we've gotten better at affirming women and acknowledging their gifts, men have kind of shrunk to the background and said, oh, it sounds like if we're claiming leadership that we're just saying that we're better. And far from it, I love the word you use, responsibility, right?
Yeah.
Leadership is about responsibility and it's about influence. And so we're taking, as men, responsibility for the church, right? We're taking responsibility to fund it, to care for it, to invest in it, to develop people within it, and to develop men, to not be Peter Pans forever, but to grow up and be the men that God's called us to be. And it's not an easy task because we're all at least 40 plus and we're still working on it. And it's a challenging endeavor that doesn't come easily.
And I was going to say, and we have to be careful that we don't fall into that Peter Pan syndrome once in a while, because it's possible that even as 40-plus-year-old men,
Yeah.
you know, we're not out of, we're not free, right?
Right.
We're not safe.
Yeah.
It's possible that we may fall back because we're not paying attention to our garden, or
Or
you
we
know,
already
but-
put in our time. Or,
yeah,
Right.
and we get lazy.
I deserve a break or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
And it's dangerous, and we can fall back into it. So we have to be vigilant, and we have to be careful about how we, as 40-plus-year-olds, you know, live our life.
That's right.
I think too, and that's so important, man. That's like where just a good accountability comes in. You know, being in a community group, being in a men's group, is you need other men in your life to say, hey, you've been doing Little League for the last
go.
8
Yeah.
Sundays in a row.
Yeah.
And we joke about that a lot, but you know, like the reality is, what are you modeling to your kids? What are you
Right.
modeling to your son when Little League for 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks takes precedence over church, and you miss church for 3 months?
Yeah.
What are you saying about the value of church, right?
Right.
And I think some of us need to be in relationships with other men where we can be challenged in that way, and we can hear from other guys to say, hey man, you better guard it. You're spending too much time with your coworker, or hey, are you watching what's happening with your daughter, the kind of guy she's dating, or
Right.
you know, we need other men to keep us accountable for that reason.
Yeah,
Because we all have blinders, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think the kid mentality is I don't want accountability,
Yeah,
right? I want
that's
to
right.
do what I want to do. And I think our culture is becoming more free to do that. Like we want to do what we want to do.
Yeah.
And we don't want anybody to tell us what to do, but following Jesus is all about doing what he tells us to do, right?
right.
Yeah.
It's saying, okay, I'm going to submit myself willingly to you and allow you to dictate the course of my life. And
That's right.
It takes a lot of humility, and it's a challenge.
and accountability.
Yeah, and accountability,
Yeah.
because it doesn't happen naturally.
No,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
we drift away
Yeah.
Yeah.
naturally.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, so someone who's struggling, like, hey, I don't want to grow up. I like being a kid. I like not having responsibility. Sounds boring to be a responsible adult. I don't want to take responsibility for the church. I mean, what would you say to someone who's kind of struggling in that arena? Because I think that's where a lot of guys are. Like, hey, that's not my job. That's not my business. You know.
Yeah. Well, I think God has something else to say about it, first
Right.
of all. But yeah, no, look, I mean, man, I think what I would say is there's immense satisfaction and joy that comes from receiving that responsibility and executing that responsibility. And I think what I would say is, man, you're missing out. You're missing out on a great blessing by not.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a sad thing. If that's your perspective, you're missing out on a great blessing, and you don't even know it.
I agree. I was thinking the exact
Well
same
said.
thing. And I think the other side of that coin is the thing. So that guy who's like, I don't want to grow up, that thing that you're pursuing, other than what God has called you to, will never satisfy you.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
So you're not only missing out, but the thing that you're chasing after won't satisfy. So you're going to chase after the next thing. It won't satisfy.
Right.
It's like eating cotton candy when you're hungry, right? When you're hungry, eating cotton candy, like it tastes great for a moment, but then you're hungry again, and all you got is a bunch of sugar water crap all over your hands, right? So that's what happens.
Yeah.
So it's both sides. That's both sides. Two sides of the same coin.
Totally.
Right. You're missing out, and what you're pursuing now will never satisfy.
Yeah.
Never satisfy. Yeah.
I like that, but I don't think you can change that overnight.
Right.
You know,
For sure.
But we can tell them, hey,
Yeah.
you're missing out.
Yeah.
This is what you need to change. But it's our responsibility to come along those men
Yeah.
and say, yeah, this is what you need to do. Let me show you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me help you. Let me walk with you.
That's right.
Because it's not easy.
Yeah.
And I don't want to just let you do it on your own.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right. And I know that because I know you guys, you know, we've all done that. And I think that's very important, not to just tell them what to do, but guide them through it.
Love
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, because only a man can call a boy into manhood.
Yeah.
Right.
Mom can't do it. The children's workers who are female can't do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
The teachers who are female can't do it. Like they all have a part to play and they make a contribution.
Yeah.
But to draw a boy into a man,
Yeah.
you need a man. You need men around you.
Yep.
Right.
And so for that guy who's struggling, who's like, I don't want to grow up, just start by surrounding yourself with some godly men.
Yeah.
And see what happens. Yeah.
The world says that it's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we know that it's not.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
That is
Appreciate
good.
you guys taking time to appreciate your experience. Appreciate you guys living it out, because I think that's what it starts with, is people actually living it out, and other people get to watch and see the blessings. And I just love how we wrap that up, of you saying that it's actually better, right? And you have to kind of taste and see. You need to be shown the way.
Yeah.
Like this way is better. It seems like this way is better.
Yeah.
You know, even the Proverbs say that all throughout. There's a way that seems great to man, but it leads to death and destruction. And God's
Right.
way is always better, but the road is harder, right? You have to work at becoming a man, work at growing in faith, and that's so challenging.
Yeah.
So,
And even just I mean, to be an encourager. I mean, I think so many of our young men. I know I've got some young guys on staff, and I find a lot of what I do is just encourage them. Like, hey, you're young. You know, it's okay. It is hard right
keep
now.
going.
You got to keep going.
Keep going.
Yeah. You got to keep going.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay, because sometimes as a young man, you need to be encouraged that, like, life is going to look different when you're in your 30s, and it's going to look different when you're in your 40s, and I pray it'll look different when it's in our 50s, right?
Yeah.
tell us about that, Dan. Yeah.
It's great.
But we
It's
need
better
that
than my
encouragement
40s,
to make it to the
Right.
next leg of the race, because we don't know.
This is
You know,
true.
our perspective is just our perspective. It's that
Right.
limited, narrow window of whatever we've experienced.
Right, and we don't have to jump to being 80-year-olds who have life.
We don't.
who've seen it. Yeah, we just need to keep taking steps forward with God as He guides us, leads us by His Spirit. Yeah.
And I think that communication and those comments and that encouragement is also telling them, when you mess up, I'm here for you.
Yeah,
Right? When
that's
you have
right.
questions, I'm here for you, because we've connected already.
That's right. Yeah.
And they're going to need that. And that's how we model. That's how we demonstrate what it is to be a godly man.
Yeah.
And letting them know that we can walk through that with them.
Yeah.
I think this point of encouragement that Ron made is really powerful, because when you think about the word encouragement, right, really it's this idea of like being filled with courage to move forward. And I really believe a lot of, even the young guys you're working with, even guys like my age and older, like, we're afraid. Can I actually do this?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, there's a part of us when we see that hill that we need to take, or that thing that we need to do that we've never done before, like, oh, can I really do this?
Yeah.
I mean, think of the first time you started to sit down and think through a merger with another church.
Yeah.
There's probably like, well, see how this goes.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is going to work, you know, but now you've done multiple, and you're like, yeah, we can, this can be done.
Yeah.
You know, but there's that sense of like, can I do this?
Yeah.
Am I cut out for this? Do I have what it takes?
Yeah.
You know,
we need
and
to empower them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
They need that encouragement. Yeah, of course you have what it takes. You wouldn't be here if you didn't have
Yeah,
what it takes.
that's right.
You need to keep going.
That's right. Yeah.
Dan, what would you just say to older men who have experience?
Yeah.
Like, what would be kind of your charge?
Since you're the old man.
Yeah, thanks. You're right
Slightly.
behind me, buddy. You're right behind me. Yeah, I think, you know, I think part of the problem is, I think the older generation is still trying to figure it out. And so they either don't care, or they've gone sort of flat, or they're just too wrapped up and still trying to figure it out for themselves.
Or being Peter Pan's like, I can't wait to retire so I can play more.
That's right. And so I'd say stop trying to figure it out and just start giving what you have.
Yeah.
Because they have something to give. Everybody has something to give.
Yeah, that's right.
No matter where you're at in life, you have something to give. Start giving what you have. And in that process, I think they'll find that they're actually going to receive 10 times
That's awesome.
what they're giving. So,
Well said.
yeah.
Well, thanks, you guys. Appreciate the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
It's been
sure.
fun.
Thanks, Bogey.